Maria had been working the midnight shift at Taco Bell for 3 months when she first noticed the secret menu item that only appeared after 3 a.m. The computer system would automatically add an option called the Midnight Special that wasn't on any official menu, priced at $6.66 with no description of ingredients. The first time someone ordered it, Maria was confused. The customer was a pale, thin man who spoke in whispers and paid with coins that looked ancient and tarnished. When she asked the kitchen staff about the midnight special, they just shrugged and said to use the special meat from the freezer in the back. The back freezer was a walk-in unit that Maria had never seen opened. Inside, she found packages labeled Midnight Special Protein in handwriting that looked decades old. The meat was an unusual dark red color, almost black, and it felt wrong when she touched it, too warm for frozen meat, with a texture that seemed to pulse under her fingers. When she prepared the order, the meat began cooking itself before she even turned on the grill. It sizzled and moved in the pan like it was still alive, releasing a smell that was both appetizing and nauseating at the same time. The customer waited patiently, never taking his eyes off Maria, never blinking, his smile growing wider as the meat cooked. After the customer left with his order, Maria noticed changes in the restaurant. The fluorescent lights flickered in patterns that almost looked like messages. The soda machine dispensed drinks that were the wrong color, Coke that was bright green, Sprite that was blood red. The ice cream machine, which had been broken for months, suddenly started working again, but it only dispensed something that looked like vanilla ice cream mixed with hair. The next night, more customers came for the midnight special. They all looked similar, pale, too thin, with eyes that reflect light like animals. They never spoke except to order, and they always paid with those same ancient coins. Maria began to notice that after serving the special, she felt weaker, more tired, as if something was being drained from her with each order. By the end of the week, Maria realized what was happening. The midnight special wasn't just food, it was feeding on something. Each time she prepared it, she could feel part of her life force being absorbed into the meat. The customers weren't eating regular food, they were consuming the essence of the people who prepared their meals. When she tried to quit, the manager, whom she had never seen during daylight hours, explained that the midnight special was a franchise requirement at certain locations. "We serve a very specific clientele after hours," he said, his smile revealing teeth that were too sharp. "And you've been specially selected to help us maintain our customer satisfaction ratings." Maria discovered that she couldn't leave the restaurant after 3 a.m. anymore. The doors would lock themselves, the phones wouldn't work, and her car keys would disappear until sunrise. She was trapped in a Taco Bell that existed in 2 different realities, a normal fast food restaurant during the day, and something much darker when the clock struck midnight. The midnight special menu still appears at certain locations, but only for customers who know to ask for it. The employees who work those shifts never stay long, and they always leave looking older than when they started, as if years of their lives have been consumed along with the mysterious meat that feeds more than just physical hunger.
If these stories sent chills down your spine, don't vanish into the darkness without hitting that like button. Share your scariest experience in the comments below, because your story might be featured next. And remember, the scariest thing is missing out, so subscribe now before the next nightmare finds you.
Jake thought the voice in the Taco Bell drive-thru sounded familiar, but he couldn't place it until he realized it was his own voice, speaking words he had never said, taking orders he had never taken. He was a customer in the drive-thru line, but somehow his voice was coming through the speaker, welcoming him to Taco Bell and asking for his order. "Welcome to Taco Bell, Jake," his own voice said through the static-filled speaker. "I know what you want to order before you do. I've been waiting for you to come back. It's been 3 days since your accident, and we've been keeping your shift covered." Jake had never worked at Taco Bell, and he hadn't been in any accident. But as he sat in his car, staring at the menu board, memories that weren't his began flooding his mind. He remembered working the drive-thru window, remembered taking orders from customers who looked exactly like him, remembered the day he had collapsed during his shift and never woken up. "Please pull forward to the first window, Jake," his own voice continued from the speaker. "Your coworkers are excited to see you again, especially the night manager. She's been wondering when you'd realize you were dead." Jake tried to drive away, but his car wouldn't respond to the steering wheel. It moved forward on its own, guided by some invisible force toward the pickup window. Through the glass, he could see employees working in slow motion, their movements deliberate and wrong, like actors who had forgotten their lines but were still performing the play. At the window was a girl he recognized as Sarah, his co-worker from the restaurant where he actually worked. Not Taco Bell, but a different fast food place across town. But Sarah had died in a car accident last week. He had attended her funeral. She was wearing a Taco Bell uniform and smiled at him with eyes that were completely black. "Hi, Jake," she said in a voice that echoed strangely. "I'm so glad you finally made it to work. We've all been waiting for you. Everyone who dies in a car accident on Highway 12 eventually finds their way here. It's like a transfer, from one restaurant to another, from one reality to the next." Jake looked around the parking lot and realized it was full of cars, but they were all damaged. Twisted metal, shattered glass, vehicles that had clearly been in horrible accidents. Inside each car sat a driver who looked confused and lost, all of them placing orders they didn't remember wanting, all of them speaking to drive-thru operators who used their own voices. "The thing about dying in a car accident," Sarah explained, as she handed him a bag of food he hadn't ordered, "is that you don't always realize it happened. Your mind keeps trying to complete your routine, going to work, getting food, living your life. So you end up here, working the eternal shift at the Taco Bell between worlds." Jake opened the bag and found it contained not food, but his personal belongings from his real job, his name tag, his work schedule, photos of his family. At the bottom was a newspaper clipping about a fatal accident on Highway 12 3 days ago. The victim's name was Jake Morrison, and his photo showed a face that was definitely his own. "Your real body is in the morgue," Sarah said matter-of-factly, "but your consciousness got redirected here. This Taco Bell only serves people who died while thinking about food, who died while driving to or from restaurants. It's like spiritual fast food, quick, convenient, and you never really leave satisfied." Jake felt himself becoming part of the restaurant staff. His clothes changed to a Taco Bell uniform, and he found himself walking toward the drive-thru headset, ready to take orders from the next confused customer who would hear their own voice welcoming them to a job they never applied for in a restaurant that exists only for people who died too suddenly to understand that their shift in the living world had already ended. The drive-thru at that particular Taco Bell is known for having excellent customer service, with employees who somehow always know exactly what customers want to order, as if they're reading their minds or speaking with their own voices.
If these stories sent chills down your spine, don't vanish into the darkness without hitting that like button. Share your scariest experience in the comments below, because your story might be featured next. And remember, the scariest thing is missing out. So subscribe now before the next nightmare finds you.
The Crunch Wrap Supreme that Beth ordered looked normal when they handed it to her at the Taco Bell on Elm Street, but when she unwrapped it at home, she found something that made her stomach turn. Inside the tortilla, mixed with the usual ingredients, were small white objects that looked suspiciously like teeth, dozens of them, in various stages of decay. Beth drove back to the restaurant to complain, but the staff insisted they had never seen her before and had no record of her order. The receipt in her purse had faded to blank paper. and when she showed them the crunch wrap with the teeth, they claimed it looked perfectly normal to them. The manager, a nervous-looking man named Dave, kept apologizing for her confusion while staring at her with eyes that seemed to see right through her. That night, Beth began having dreams about the Taco Bell kitchen. In her dreams, she could see the food preparation area, but it wasn't the clean, regulated environment she expected. Instead, she saw employees grinding something that definitely wasn't meat, mixing ingredients that came from containers labeled with medical terms she didn't recognize, preparing food that moved and writhed on its own. The dreams became more vivid each night. She watched as workers harvested ingredients from a basement that shouldn't exist under the single-story restaurant. The basement was filled with dental chairs and medical equipment, and the employees down there weren't preparing food. They were performing procedures on customers who had eaten the special menu items. Beth started researching the history of the Taco Bell location and discovered that it had been built on the site of a dental clinic that had closed abruptly in 1987 after allegations of illegal experiments. Dr. Marcus Webb, the clinic's owner, had been accused of harvesting organs and body parts from patients under anesthesia, but he disappeared before he could be arrested. The more Beth investigated, the stranger her experiences became. She would find teeth in all her food, no matter where she ate or what she ordered. Her own teeth began feeling loose in her mouth, and when she looked in the mirror, she could see that her dental work was changing, fillings moving to different teeth, crowns appearing where she'd never had dental problems. When she finally worked up the courage to return to the Taco Bell, she found Dr. Webb himself working behind the counter, wearing a food service uniform but still possessing the same distinctive features from the old newspaper photos. He smiled at her with teeth that were clearly not his own, a mixture of different sizes, colors, and conditions, like a collection harvested from many different people. "Ms. Rodriguez," he said, consulting a clipboard that appeared to contain dental charts rather than food orders, "I'm so glad you came back. You're scheduled for a follow-up procedure. Your teeth have been responding very well to our special dietary supplements." Beth tried to run, but found that her legs wouldn't obey her commands. Looking around the restaurant, she realized that all the other customers were sitting perfectly still, eating their food with mechanical precision, their mouths opening to reveal teeth that clearly belonged to other people. The Crunchwrap Supreme is our most popular item. It's crunchy because of the special calcium supplements we add, harvested fresh daily from our customer base. Think of it as a recycling program. Your teeth help make our food crunchy, and our food helps us collect more teeth. Beth felt her mouth being pried open as Dr. Webb and his staff began the procedure she had somehow agreed to by eating the contaminated crunch wrap. Around her, other customers were undergoing similar treatments, their teeth being removed and replaced with random selections from a large collection jar behind the counter. The Taco Bell on Elm Street still serves Crunchwrap Supremes, and customers often comment on the unusual crunchiness of the ingredients. The restaurant has an unusually high rate of customer loyalty. People who eat there once tend to keep coming back, even though they can never quite explain why the food always tastes different from what they remember ordering.
If these stories sent chills down your spine, don't vanish into the darkness without hitting that like button. Share your scariest experience in the comments below, because your story might be featured next. And remember, the scariest thing is missing out, so subscribe now before the next nightmare finds you.
College student Mike Chen was pulling an all-nighter at the 24-hour Taco Bell near campus when he noticed that he wasn't the only one who seemed to be there permanently. The same group of students had been sitting in the corner booth for the entire 6 hours he'd been studying, and their textbooks never seemed to change, their food never seemed to be consumed, and their conversations never seemed to progress. At first, Mike thought they were just dedicated students like himself, cramming for finals while surviving on cheap fast food and caffeine. But as the night wore on, he began to notice details that didn't make sense. The girl with the chemistry textbook had been on the same page for 3 hours. The guy with the laptop was typing constantly, but the screen never showed any new text appearing. Around 4 a.m., Mike decided to introduce himself to the group, thinking he might have found his study companions for the rest of finals week. But when he approached their table, he realized they couldn't see or hear him. They continued their studying routine as if he wasn't there, even when he waved his hand directly in front of their faces. That's when Mike noticed the dates on their textbooks and assignments. Everything was from the previous semester, not just previous, but from 15 years ago. The chemistry textbook was from 2009. The laptop was running software that had been obsolete for over a decade. The assignment sheets had dates from a semester that had ended before Mike had even started college. Mike tried to leave the restaurant, but found the doors were locked from the inside. The employees were gone, and the lights had dimmed to a strange orange glow that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. His phone showed no signal, and the time displayed was stuck at 3:33 a.m., no matter how long he waited. The group of students suddenly looked up from their work and stared directly at him. Their eyes were hollow and tired, with dark circles that looked like they hadn't slept in years. The girl with the chemistry book spoke in a voice that sounded like it was coming from very far away. "You shouldn't have stayed past 3:30, she said. "That's when the study session becomes permanent. We've been here for 15 years, trying to finish our finals. We can't leave until we complete all our coursework, but every time we finish an assignment, 3 more appear. The workload just keeps growing." Mike looked at his own textbooks and realized they had changed. His history book had become a massive tome with thousands of pages. His math homework had multiplied into dozens of problem sets, and his computer screen was now filled with essay assignments that seemed to write themselves, creating an endless stream of academic requirements. "The Taco Bell near campus isn't really a restaurant after 3:30 a.m., explained the guy with the laptop, whose fingers had worn down to bone from 15 years of constant typing. "It's a study purgatory for students who pushed themselves too hard, who refused to go home, who thought they could survive on fast food and determination alone." Mike felt his energy being drained, but not by tiredness, by the academic pressure that seemed to be increasing exponentially. Every time he solved one math problem, 10 more appeared. Every time he finished reading a chapter, 5 more chapters were added to the book. The coursework was feeding on itself, growing larger and more complex with each completion. "We've calculated that it would take approximately 847 years to finish all the assignments," said another student, who was working on what appeared to be a chemistry lab report that had grown to over 3,000 pages. "But new ones keep appearing faster than we can complete them. It's like academic interest, compound knowledge that accumulates faster than it can be paid off." Mike realized he was trapped in an eternal study session, surrounded by students who had been caught in the same academic death spiral years or decades before. The Taco Bell had become a limbo for overachievers, a place where the pursuit of knowledge had become a literally endless punishment. The restaurant still operates normally during regular hours, but students who stay past 3:30 a.m. report feeling an overwhelming urge to study, and many are found the next morning by the cleaning crew, surrounded by homework assignments that seem far too complex for any actual college course, working on projects that will never be finished because completion only generates more work in an academic system that has learned to perpetuate itself infinitely.
If these stories sent chills down your spine, don't vanish into the darkness without hitting that like button. Share your scariest experience in the comments below, because your story might be featured next. And remember, the scariest thing is missing out. So subscribe now, before the next nightmare finds you.
When new employee Jessica Martinez was promoted to shift supervisor, she was finally given access to the recipe storage room at her Taco Bell location. What she found there challenged everything she thought she knew about fast food preparation. The recipes weren't for the menu items customers ordered, but for something much more disturbing. The storage room contained hundreds of recipe cards dating back decades, But they weren't instructions for making tacos or burritos. Instead, they were detailed procedures for processing and preparing human experiences, emotions, and memories. Sadness sauce. Extract despair from customers who eat alone. Concentrate until bitter. Add to all meat products. Anxiety seasoning. Harvest stress hormones during rush hour. Dry and grind fine. Sprinkle on all orders. Jessica thought it was some kind of elaborate prank until she found the industrial equipment in the basement that she had never known existed. Machines that looked like a cross between kitchen appliances and medical devices, all designed to extract and process intangible human qualities. The meat grinder wasn't just for meat. It was processing crushed dreams and failed ambitions into a paste that was added to the refried beans. The recipe cards were signed by previous shift supervisors going back 30 years, each one documenting improvements to the extraction process. Found that heartbreak seasons the chicken better than regular salt. Depression marinade works best when customers are isolated from friends and family. Loneliness enhances all flavors. Make sure dining area remains uncomfortable. Jessica realized that the Taco Bell wasn't just serving food. It was feeding on the emotional state of its customers and employees. The uncomfortable seating, the harsh lighting, the locations in depressing strip malls weren't accidents. They were specifically designed to create the emotional conditions necessary for harvesting the ingredients that went into the secret recipes. When she confronted the district manager about what she had found, he seemed relieved that she finally knew the truth. The regular food is just a cover, he explained. What we're really serving is processed human experience. Customers don't come back because they love the taste of our tacos. They come back because we're literally feeding them their own emotions, concentrated and refined. Jessica learned that every Taco Bell employee was unknowingly part of the harvesting process. The stress of working in fast food, the depression of dead-end jobs, the anxiety of dealing with difficult customers, all of it was being collected, processed, and served back to the community in carefully measured doses. The beauty of the system, the district manager continued, is that it's self-sustaining. Unhappy employees create better ingredients, which make customers more addicted to our food, which brings in more revenue, which allows us to hire more unhappy employees. It's the perfect business model. Jessica tried to quit, but found that her resignation wasn't accepted. She had been selected for the supervisor position specifically because her life experiences, a recent divorce, financial problems, family issues, made her an ideal source for the ingredients needed in the secret recipes. Her personal emotional output was too valuable to lose. The recipes continued to evolve, with Jessica being required to document new extraction techniques. Desperation dip works best during late-night shifts when employees question their life choices. Hopelessness hash, extracted from workers who realize they'll never escape food service industry. Jessica discovered that she was becoming part of the recipe herself. Her emotions were being harvested so efficiently that she began to feel empty, hollow, as if everything that made her human was being slowly processed and served to customers who would consume her experiences without ever knowing what they were really eating. The secret recipe cards are still there, hidden in storage rooms at locations across the country. The ingredients list for every menu item includes a percentage of processed human emotion, carefully calibrated to create the specific psychological effects that keep customers coming back for more, never quite satisfied, but always craving whatever ineffable quality makes that particular fast food experience impossible to replicate at home.
If these stories sent chills down your spine, don't vanish into the darkness without hitting that like button. Share your scariest experience in the comments below, because your story might be featured next. And remember, the scariest thing is missing out, so subscribe now before the next nightmare finds you.
The Taco Bell on Riverside Drive seemed like the perfect place for 8-year-old Tommy's birthday party. Cheap, convenient, and they had agreed to let the family use the party room for 2 hours. But what started as a normal birthday celebration turned into something that would haunt the surviving family members for the rest of their lives. Everything went wrong when they brought out the birthday cake, a custom Taco Bell cake that the manager had insisted on providing as a special surprise. The cake looked normal enough, but when Tommy blew out the candles, they didn't go out. Instead, they flared brighter, and the frosting began to move and writhe like it was alive. The children at the party were the first to notice that something was wrong with the cake. They began screaming that the decorations were moving, that the frosting had formed faces that were looking at them, that the cake was whispering their names. The adults thought it was typical childhood overreaction until they looked at the cake themselves and saw that the children were right. The birthday cake was covered in tiny human faces made of frosting, each one perfectly detailed and unmistakably alive. The faces were moving their mouths, trying to speak, their tiny frosting eyes filled with terror and desperation. As the family watched in horror, the faces began to grow larger, pushing up through the cake's surface like they were trying to escape. Tommy's mother tried to throw the cake away, but found that it had somehow fused to the table. The frosting faces were now large enough to be recognizable. They were the faces of children who had disappeared from the local area over the past several years. Children whose missing person posters still hung in store windows around town. The Taco Bell employees seemed oblivious to what was happening. They continued serving other customers as if nothing was wrong, even as the birthday party descended into chaos. When Tommy's father demanded to speak to the manager, he was told that the manager was in the kitchen putting finishing touches on the special dessert. The special dessert turned out to be more birthday cakes, each one covered with the faces of missing children, each one singing "Happy Birthday" in voices that were barely audible, but clearly desperate. The cakes were arranged on a cart that rolled itself out of the kitchen, guided by hands that belonged to no visible person. Tommy tried to run, but found that the party room doors had locked themselves from the outside. Through the window, his family could see other customers in the main dining area, all of them children, all of them sitting alone at tables with birthday cakes covered with faces, all of them singing "Happy Birthday" in that same barely audible, desperate voice. The manager finally appeared, a tall, thin man wearing a Taco Bell uniform that looked like it hadn't been washed in decades. His smile was too wide, revealing teeth that clearly were not human, and his eyes reflected light like an animal's in the darkness of the party room. "Happy birthday, Tommy," the manager said in a voice that seemed to come from all of the frosting faces at once. "You're our special birthday boy today. All the other birthday boys and girls have been waiting to meet you. They've been part of our birthday cake family for so long, and now you get to join them." Tommy felt himself being pulled toward the cake, not by physical force, but by some irresistible compulsion. Around him, the other children at the party were also being drawn to the various cakes that had appeared throughout the room, each child's face already beginning to appear in miniature on the frosting surface of their assigned cake. The birthday party at that Taco Bell is still going on, according to reports from employees who work there now. Every day, at exactly the same time, the party room fills with the sound of children singing "Happy Birthday," and customers sometimes report seeing faces in their food, tiny, desperate faces that mouth the words "Help us," before disappearing back into the frosting, meat, and cheese that makes up every order.
If these stories sent chills down your spine, don't vanish into the darkness without hitting that like button. Share your scariest experience in the comments below, because your story might be featured next. And remember, the scariest thing is missing out. So subscribe now, before the next nightmare finds you.
When successful businessman Robert Hayes bought the failing Taco Bell franchise on Highway 51, he thought he was getting a great deal. Too good to be true, in fact. The previous owner had been desperate to sell, offering the property and equipment for a fraction of its actual value, with only one condition. Robert had to agree never to renovate the kitchen or change any of the equipment. The conditions seemed reasonable until Robert discovered why the previous owner had been so eager to leave. Hidden in the office safe was a franchise manual that wasn't from Taco Bell corporate. It was a detailed guide to running what the document called a collection and processing facility for human essence extraction, disguised as a fast food restaurant. According to the manual, the restaurant's true purpose was to serve as a harvesting station for a much larger organization that collected and processed human souls, emotions, and life force for distribution to non-human entities that sustained themselves on human experience. The fast food franchise was the perfect cover. People expected to feel drained and unsatisfied after eating cheap food. The kitchen equipment Robert had agreed not to change wasn't actually for food preparation. The fryer was designed to process liquefied human despair. The grill extracted and concentrated emotional pain. And the drink machines dispensed refined human anxiety mixed with standard soft drinks. Every menu item contained a percentage of processed human experience. Robert tried to contact Taco Bell corporate to report the situation, but discovered that the phone number in his franchise documentation connected him to something that definitely wasn't a corporate office. The voice on the other end spoke in languages he didn't recognize, and when he demanded to speak to someone in charge, he was told that he was already speaking to his regional collections supervisor. The manual explained that franchise owners weren't just business operators, they were soul brokers, responsible for meeting monthly quotas for human essence extraction. The more effectively the restaurant could drain its customers and employees of their life force, the higher the profits would be. Financial success was directly tied to spiritual exploitation. Robert learned that he couldn't sell the franchise or close the restaurant without fulfilling his contract obligations. The fine print in his purchase agreement, which he had signed without reading carefully, committed him to operating the extraction facility for a minimum of 25 years, with penalties for early termination that included forfeiting his own soul to make up for lost productivity. The previous owners had all tried to escape their contracts in various ways. Some had attempted suicide, but found themselves unable to die as long as they still owed time on their franchise agreement. Others had tried to expose the operation, but discovered that no one would believe them, and that speaking publicly about the true nature of the business only accelerated their own essence extraction process. Robert realized that he was already being drained by his ownership of the franchise. Every day he worked there, he felt a little less human, a little more like a hollow shell going through the motions of running a business. His reflection in mirrors was becoming fainter, and photographs of him were gradually becoming blank spaces surrounded by confused-looking family members. The manual contained a section on franchise succession planning that explained how each owner would eventually be completely consumed by the extraction process, at which point their hollowed-out body would continue operating the restaurant while their consciousness became part of the equipment, helping to process the next generation of customers and employees. Robert found evidence of previous owners throughout the restaurant, their faces barely visible in the reflection of stainless steel surfaces, their voices occasionally audible through the ventilation system, their personalities absorbed into the restaurant's atmosphere, where they continued to help attract and process customers, even after their physical forms had been completely consumed. The franchise continues to operate successfully, with Robert's hollow shell managing daily operations while his consciousness has been integrated into the kitchen equipment, helping to improve the extraction efficiency for future customers. The restaurant consistently receives high marks for customer service, with reviewers commenting that the staff seem to understand exactly what customers need, as if they can read minds or see directly into people's souls.
If these stories sent chills down your spine, don't vanish into the darkness without hitting that like button. Share your scariest experience in the comments below, because your story might be featured next. And remember, the scariest thing is missing out, so subscribe now before the next nightmare finds you.